Uh, hmm. Um, okay, I put this up on the screen because I want to show you a short PowerPoint. But I guess it's going to show everything I do here, but it won't show on YouTube, so that's okay. All right. Um, if you notice again on the cover sheet, I did put the public comment period on here with some
Yes, thank you.
detail this time, Ms. Martin. So obviously there's nobody here. I just thought I'd say that out loud since um, we're on YouTube. The first committee is planning and zoning. I'm not sure. Is Mr. DeCross away? Oh, okay. Well, Dawn wasn't able to come tonight. All I have is reminders. He did ask that I put these photos on the agenda related to the fence ordinance stuff that he wanted to talk about. I'm not sure if he left any information with anybody else or not. I can show these to you on the screen from my computer. But pardon me?
I think Mr. Erbaldinger will be able to report on this,
Oh,
but
he
I'm
will?
not sure.
Oh, okay. So do you want to wait a minute then? Okay, okay.
Did share it with Joe. Audience. The generous farm.
That's right.
What is it?
It's just the proposed revisions.
Oh,
For the form.
are you going to talk about this then? Okay,
If the questions are such that I'm not comfortable, we can go to executive session.
you need me to show the photos or?
Well, I think Marcus might know.
Okay.
I was just gonna talk about what we've come up with.
Okay.
As a potential solution.
Okay.
I get some feedback.
No, it's.
Oh, yeah. So I guess I'll take this. One of the issues that we've dealt with on the regular here is the situation with fences being placed on corner lots. Where it basically, the way it is written, I don't think there has been a single individual that wanted a fence and lived on a corner lot that did not have to come to the borough variance from the zoning ordinance, which entails a $1,200 at the upfront, where you do get a refund if it's not all used. So one of the things that Joe wanted us to do is look at ways to move around that, but still allow folks to put the fence in their side yard, the corner lot side, but still, in such a way that is consistent with what we're trying to do, but maybe will result in fewer variance requests. So what I've done here is basically set the rules where a fence is not permitted to be in the front yard. So you have to think about corner lots a little bit different, right? So corner lot has a front yard that you would think is the traditional front yard, which is outside of your front door. But also the side yard that is adjacent to the street is also considered a front yard under our ordinance. Ordinance says you can't have a fence in a front yard except for, and the current ordinance has a bunch of stipulations which are hard to meet. So basically, I indicated that fences are permitted in the side yard, front yard, but they cannot go past the front building line. So they can't go past the front of your home unless you get a variance. And it cannot encroach into the clear sight triangle, which is the safety triangle. So when you pull up to the intersection and you look to the right and to the left, you're able to see on traffic. It's supposed to be about 30 feet back, but I did put language in here just in case there are unique scenarios with the intersection that the engineer, a larger triangle is sufficient there, requires. And then also that you cannot put the fence in the right of way that goes along the road, side yard, or the second front yard. That should give most folks an area to fence in the side of their property and into the back.
You define a minimum distance from the road or the right of way to the fence?
It just has to be outside of the right of way. So that's usually, it just depends, but we do have GIS mapping that would tell us that. We can work with the applicant to identify that.
And I think we also need to add a paragraph for double street lots, meaning the front is one road and the back is another road. So they have neighbors on the left and right, but the backyard, there's a road. There's like Wilkins and Woodside, for example, lots who have both. They should be, I mean, it's a bit easier than corner lots because they don't have right of way. Line of sight is not, but the distance, it should be still apply. There's a portion where you define how far the fence, like your 30 inches, all that stuff should apply to that line lots with a back street. But I think it should be a separate paragraph.
So that wouldn't be a, well, I guess it's kind of like a four corner at that point almost, right? Yeah, so I can think about, we'll look at
They have
that.
neighbors on each side, but the
Streets are in the front and the back.
we had like on Bryn Mawr, you like that lady with a fence, we actually did allow it. On Concord, we allowed a fence there. That's pretty much, I think, what Joe wants. I think I talked to him. He said, what we did in all our variances, we pretty much should just put in an ordinance so people don't have to go through the effort.
And I think the way that I put it together for the traditional corner lot is consistent with what we've been okay with. Not into the real front yard, not in the triangle, not too close to the road. So out in the right way. I think we've been able to live with that, and those are the kinds of variances that have been granted by the. I can look at the front and backyard issue and come back. In the next week, that's 2 weeks. And we can talk about.
Well, I have a question for you.
Yes.
So, excuse me, if where the mailbox is, wouldn't that indicate where the front of the house is?
Yes.
So then the other side of the corner lot wouldn't actually be a front. Is that,
Well, the way
I'm
that,
just asking.
the way that our ordinance defines a front yard, it would include that sign.
I see.
It's just
Okay.
based on, and I didn't want to change the definition because there are other things that we want to keep out of a front yard that we made. So I looked at it from the exception perspective, not changing the front yard on a corner. Drawing diagrams down there, so. I suppose you could go. Yeah, you could. We could ask Kevin Brett to put something.
Because that would kind of help people. Might not be able to visualize that.
I'll be honest with you, Mr. Kayaki, the language in number 3 that existed before, I always had to read it like 7 times to make sure. Got it. So I can only imagine what, just anybody from the borough reading. This should make it easier. I like the idea of a diagram.
Question on this?
Yeah.
You have a rough idea of how many, either total number, like percentage of corner lots have variances in the borough related to this?
I would probably say since in like maybe we get 1 or 2 a year. For this decade or so.
And I think we have a bunch of lots who just did it without asking. So they're kind of technically illegal, but no one complains, so.
We do usually 1 or 2 a year.
There's another question. Is the 30 feet, is that taken from some sort of specific engineering guideline somewhere? Or is that okay?
Related to some sort of this national, what they call it, the Green Book. When we researched other communities, that site triangle distance was set from as determined by the engineer for each intersection to 75, which was way too large. I mean, that's basically 30 feet might be too large in many scenarios, but that's what we've used throughout the borough. And that's why I added the language about the borough engineer can review and make a determination. Hey, it only needs to be 20 feet. Hey, it needs to be 45 feet because of whatever the situation may be there, the geographic issues, etc. So Forest Hills is on the hills, so there are different channels. You know. Yes.
Have to involve our planning and zoning board, I guess not, or we can,
We do.
like, doing an ordinance like that, it's kind of their turf, do we have to involve them?
It is, but the way the MPC is written, zoning ordinances can start in the planning and zoning committee or planning commission. Or it can start from a borough council. In either scenario, the planning commission does get to review and comment on the ordinance before we would send it to the county. The county has a chance to review it for 45 days. Anything that we do along these lines would not be effective in a traditional timeline until this point, June or July. One of the things that we can do as a council is we can use, if to the extent you're comfortable with it, we can use what's called the pending ordinance doctrine, where you would pass a resolution at a meeting that says this, our intent is to adopt this when we are able. It's going to be considered on this date specific. You run an advertisement the next day, and then anybody that would apply for a fence this year before the ordinance was officially adopted by council would be able to take advantage of the new language. So that was going to be my recommendation, if you all were okay with that. So we didn't have to put folks through the ringer.
Mr. Coble, one more question. So, and then if the ordinance or the change did not pass, those folks would still be grandfathered in.
I apologize for, I think, opening a can of worms here, but thinking about various intersections in the borough right now, including some like Ardmore and Braddock Road, where I'm quite sure that like the stone structures and walls and everything do not even remotely fit within the like 30 feet distance, and that's probably one of our highest risk intersections. Is there a certain date in the like existing buildings in that very first line in the part one. Is there a certain date that was kind of the start of this that everything would have been grandfathered by?
Well, my recollection is that some of this language came in when we adopted the code, which would have been the early 2000s. But if that wall was built 50 years before then, it's considered a non-structure. They have no obligation to actively move. Now, if they would tear it down or something, like it would be destroyed, then there are arguments and that they would have to comply with.
Okay. Aside from that, just thinking of like hedges and various things, like I would be shocked if there's not at least a quarter of all intersections in the borough that don't fall outside of these rules right now. Is this something where we would have a defined like long-term enforcement structure on this? Because I just feel like if we're actually going to be consistent on this, there's a huge number of places that do not fall within this.
So it doesn't necessarily need compliance controls. So it's really been considered. That's how we enforce that portion of the ordinance. So if somebody would complain that, hey, I can't see out of this. But I have one in my other communities right now.
And we did have cases like that in the past, like the street I'm living has like a big S going up a hill, it's really hard to see. And there was a big tree kind of blocking, we made those people to cut down the tree. So occasionally it happens that we actually do get complaints and we fix it.
Is this something where potentially on the engineering review then, if it's like a four-way stop or something like that, where it's not maybe the engineer could theoretically decide that it doesn't need the full 30 feet? Is that possible within this?
Less than 30, more. Is basically, I think, our general standard that is. Depending on the individual conditions of the intersection, it could be.
Thank you.
And that's it for, I didn't realize that I was actually running.
You're good, because well, here, I will work on the front and back situation, and I will reach out to Mr. Brett about maybe a diagram.
So that's it for planning funding. But Bob found us like some $350,000, so it was worth to update that chart. That's it, so we can do.
Okay,
Oh, that's me again.
so finance is up next, and I have one report I want to give you. And hopefully it will work with this. Go. I attached a handout. Some of you have seen this before and some of you haven't, called Understanding Forest Hills Financial Reports. And rather than try to go through this in any detail, because you can read this, I'm just going to highlight a couple things. Should take me no more than 10 minutes, maybe less than that, on here. And if you want to ask me any questions, let me know. The treasurer gives you 5 monthly reports every month, obviously. And I wanted to just to highlight what those reports are so that you have an idea. And again, the information that's in that text explains it a little bit more than I have here. one of the first things you get is the disbursements. That's what the cover sheet looks like on the left. And that's monthly disbursements. It's a summary of payments that were made, regular bills usually. Anything extraordinary or unusual usually comes directly to you first. But in this case, this is general bills that you're going to approve every month. That's where that list comes from. And disbursements often have more than just one category. Like in this case, I'm just showing the total disbursements for the month, but usually she breaks it down on the cover sheet by budget. So that when the motion is being made by Mr. Erbaldinger, you're seeing that broken down that way. And the idea is, of course, you've already paid the bills because most of them you can't wait on. If you could wait, if you waited until council approved them, we'd be paying penalties on a lot of bills. So these are generally more routine bills. Of course, obviously, if you see there's a conflict of interest in a bill that's being paid for whatever reason, maybe you work for a company, for example, that we are paying a bill to, then you would try to recuse yourself before you would you wouldn't vote on that one particular thing. The second thing I have is the financial report that comes at the every month, again with these 5, that breaks down all the different budgets. I realize you can't read the thing on the right, but if you look at it up close, it's just the same thing I have on your whoops, why isn't that not showing? There we go. It's the same thing I have on your handout on page 1. Okay, I just wanted you to be able to relate the handout to the documents we're talking about. So when you get this issued report, you are getting a report that shows you each individual budget, the general fund budget, the capital budgets. Capital 1 is also called capital improvements plan. Capital 2 is called the corrective action budget. So you're getting that in there. And again, you're getting it the end of the previous month. So for example, when she sends you this one this month, it will be through the end of February. You'll get it probably in a week. And it will show you year-to-date information, how much was spent during that given month. You'll also see it for a year ago, both year-to-date from a year ago and the given month from a year ago. Okay, and that's for each of these various budgets, so you can have an idea of how to track them. And then again, I realize you can't see the numbers, so I'm going to blow that up a little bit here. Whoops. This is what the last year's earned income tax collection comparison chart looked like when at the end of December. Okay, and you can see that it compares 2022 to 2023. It shows you both a monthly and year-to-date for each year, and then it shows you how much ahead or behind we were compared to the previous year. This is for earned income tax. And
budgeted, you kind of keep it to what we had the previous year. You don't add like another raise into it. You budget.
you don't do what?
You budget income tax like that. Put in a budget, you keep it steady. You don't anticipate that with the raise.
Well, the earned income tax has been going up every year. And if you look at the old stats in the book, I almost have the new book ready to go. The new stats will be on the website soon, but you'll see that with earned income tax in particular, it's been going up every year, I think, except for one. So the one reason probably why is because everybody was forced to go to that collection system. We use Keystone now. We're all in tax districts. So everything has to go, it's awful hard. It's harder for somebody to evade paying that tax now, because wherever you work is supposed to take it from you, your pay, and send it to the proper place, the place where you live. If you're self-employed, maybe those people can get around it a little bit, but basically it's a lot harder. So this just compares the earned income tax collection from one year to the next. And similarly, we do one with RAD. You'll see it looks like, whoops, like this. RAD is Regional Asset District. Again, it's the same kind of layout. previous year, current year. This is through the end of 2023. And it compares how much we got from regional asset district. And don't forget that if you end up the year with a plus compared to last year, like we did this year, in 2023, we exceeded 2022 by $20,000. You see that down there, $20,300.72. So that extra 25% of that had to be given to an intergovernmental cooperation agency like the COG. But as I've mentioned before to you, it doesn't have to go to the COG. COGs all think it does, but it does not. That's the way the law was written. So you're going to see that's another form you're going to get. So that's 4 of the regular treasurer's reports that you get every month from Allison. And then you also get something separate called a treasurer's report. This is the same thing that we put on at the end of the agendas for business meetings. I'm not exactly sure why we show that. We started doing that last year, or maybe the end of the year before. I'm not exactly sure why, because if you don't know what we're talking about here, anybody from the public sitting here would not really understand it, or would think that maybe you're making way too much money here from taxes and should cut or something like that. I don't know, but it does show you all the borough accounts at a given point in time. So for example, this is the top part of the report that you get. Whoops. And it shows you the checking accounts first. Okay. General fund, real estate, payroll, and pool improvement. Those are all separate checking accounts we have with cash. This is again through the end of January, how much was in there. And that was on the February agenda for everybody to look at. Let's see, pool improvement, I wanted to point out to you, does represent money that was donated over the years, and it stays there. So I'm not sure if everybody realized that there is money there, but there is for pool improvements. It's the $14,756 as of the end of January. Okay. And then you also have, let me blow this up again too. You also have all the different investment accounts. The liquid fuels starts out, and you'll see it's in Pliget. Pliget, PLGIT, stands for Pennsylvania Local Government Investment Trust. And that's one of the places where you can deposit funds. The Treasury Department for the state also has something called PA Invest, and you can deposit money there too. We only have liquid fuels in Pliget. Almost anything else we either have in the bank or we have with PA Invest. And so if you take a look at these numbers, again, this was what was shown on the agenda at the end of, for the end of January. The American Rescue Plan is on there. The various capital budgets are on there. Notice there is a Capital 2 reserve and a Capital 1 reserve. There's a pension reserve account, which I do explain in some detail in the handout, and I'll be happy to go into any more of this detail with you when I'm done here if you want. But I didn't want to just read through that whole thing. It would take it, probably an hour to go through it with questions and everything. Notice that the K-9 fund is still active. It still has money in it anyway. That's of course up to you guys to decide what you're doing with it. And the master fund is usually where we end up taking a lot of the money for paying bills too. So when, for example, Mr. Erbaldinger said in the past, we do have cash everywhere, when I was talking about how, well, we came in negative numbers in general fund. We do, you do have cash, but it's set up for certain things too. Like, for example, where is it now? I don't know why I'm not seeing it here. Well, two things. You see right here in the middle, the solar panels. That was money that we had a surplus from the general fund, and we decided to start putting it into a separate account to prepare for whatever you're going to do when the time comes to deal with these solar panels up here. I know that we're paying EIS, I guess, for them every month. we did not buy them ourselves, but we did want to put some money aside. So Wendy Archer, the treasurer at the time, and I decided we're just going to stick it into a separate place to keep it separate. We didn't have to go to council to do that because you can always take that money out of there. We're just putting it into something and labeling it something.
And maybe
But-
just add for the new council members, it's basically our solar panels, like normal people, when they get solar panels, they get 30% tax, right? But we as a community could not do that. That's why we had to go to the external company. They paid for the solar panels, they got the tax write-off, and we basically buy the electricity from them. But we did like some kind of rent to own here. So eventually, I think after 15 years, we have to pay them, I think it's like $400,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then we would fully own it. We have like a rent to own scheme with the solar. That's what the money is for. So eventually we have to pay, I think it's like 400.
I think so. Two other things I wanted to point out to you. The top, second line from the top, budget reserve, that's what we had in the budget reserve as of the end of January, 494,000 plus. That follows the policy that council set years ago to have a reserve fund that equaled approximately 7% of the general fund budget. So we're a little bit over 7%. If you looked at, well, maybe you wouldn't notice that right off if you didn't compare. But I think it's like 7.11% that we're over as far as how much to put inside. The state is the one who recommends having a budget reserve. That's it. You'll see a quote I have in here from the fiscal handbook the state publishes, and they recommend anywhere from 5 to 15%. They call it a rainy day fund, or you can call it anything you want. We call it budget reserve. At the same time, council also did it about 4 lines down, Capital One Reserve, which the goal for that was $250,000. We're kind of close to that. That's again just a reserve account for capital purchases. And then down up above that is the Capital Two Reserve. That's the one that LSSE is now telling us we should start spending again. I'm sorry, investing money in again. Glenn had told us, no, we don't need that money. But originally the thought was at the end of the teens here in the 2000s, that we were supposed to have about $1 million available in 2026 for this Alcosan regionalization, all that. Now that's sort of been pushed back a little bit as far as Alcosan is concerned, but LSSE is still saying to be safe, we should try to have some money, more money put aside for us, because whatever is going to happen when they're all done with that, the different communities are still going to have to put some money toward what Alcosan is doing. Now, that's one reason why you guys should try to attend some of the different sewer programs that either Three Rivers Wet Weather has, or the Alcosan has, or the health department has, because you need to know what's going to happen. LSSE does go, and they can report in more detail to you on that, so you want that. The thing I had been looking for was 3 up from the bottom, PA Invest Money Market. That's new building is what it starts to say, 516,000. For those of you who were on council a few years back, you remember when we moved up here, I told, I don't want to go through the whole thing, I guess, but I essentially got an okay from council that we should keep that money there instead of reimbursing the general fund, which at the time had been paying for some of the things from this building. The reason being that we have some maintenance that has to happen, like the geothermal stuff, for example. And so you have money that can come out of. We also had some things we had not finished here. For example, there is a room in the police department that's unfurnished. The thought at that time had been maybe there'd be a sergeant or somebody like that would need a separate office. And that's still something that you could consider if you want. I'm not pushing that. I'm just saying so that was not furnished. Okay, we didn't furnish the lobby right away. We didn't furnish the small conference room right away. So we've been taking money out of that and also paying McCamish for the geothermal work. And where that money came from, why it's there, that was from the bond issue and other capital money that council had put aside to build this building. Okay, so obviously you could take money from there for something else if you want to, but realize you're taking money that you're going to be paying off for another 10, 15 years. Well, yeah, about 12, 15 years, something like that.
Like, for example, we're going to close the wall between the community room and the library. Take out that part.
Right.
And when I came on council, we were like, money was much more tighter. So we took out a tax anticipation law. So, our taxes come rolling in April and May, but we have to spend money in January, February. We actually paid a bank interest for that tax anticipation law. Now we're actually just loaning ourselves from that, like that $500,000 actually not sitting there. That's already, we will take some loan against ourselves, obviously. Well, very useful for that.
There were two things that were supposed to happen in this building that didn't. One was there was supposed to be another exit out of the back. That's where the kitchen is. There was supposed to be a door. Another, if you look in the hallway down there, there's an exit sign above the police entry door. The only one that can get in there is me because I have a code. I mean, nobody else is allowed in there. I had to be fingerprinted to be allowed to go into the police side. Okay, and I think there's only 3 of us that were fingerprinted. So there's no other egress over there. That is a secondary thing. The other thing was the wall that's here was not supposed to be duplicated on the library side, but they did anyway. They had already, by the time we got around to that, we already bought it. And you know, from, if you've been in here, when there's been things going on in another room, like the library, if they were active right now, would hear me. Probably almost as if they were right here. When they have kids over there and they're having games or something, you can hear them in here. So you can't do that. It was never supposed to happen that way. The idea at the time had been, if we need to have a big meeting, we're going to open the doors. Well, I don't want somebody in the library, because who's going to monitor that? How are we going to know where they're going to take books or whatever? So they weren't supposed to do that, but they did. And that's my opinion, that we weren't supposed to do that, but we did. Anyway, let me move on here. Then there's a whole bunch of other things that I know you probably can't read all that in great detail, but what the master fund is, fire protection services, all that money stays with fire. Anything that goes into that fire fee budget stays there. I already mentioned the new building fund and the solar panels. The pension reserve was set up originally because we're taking advantage of the state allowing us to just pay 75% of what we owed into the pension, with the idea that hopefully the investments would come up and down the road, well, we'd have to pay the additional money. Maybe it won't be as much as what it was when we were doing that. So there was 4 years when we were allowed to do that. Well, what I did and the treasurer did, and I asked counsel about this too, we banked the 25% and put it in a pension reserve account. There's $40,000 left in there. So this will be the last year that you'll have money to go to pay off the municipal obligation you have for pensions or what have you. Now, sometimes the bookkeeper, the treasurer, will use it as a bookkeeping tool and move money into that so they have some place to show it and they'll take it back out. That's pretty much all that it really is, though, is just a bookkeeping tool. Now, and then real estate escrow funds, we had that account set up years ago when the new assessment system had gone into effect in 2013, because at the time we weren't sure if we were going to have to, we were going to suffer a lot of appeals. And so we banked money thinking that we weren't going to be able to, we were going to have to pay people back after they appealed the higher assessments. And so we kept that fund. Sometimes we still put money into it, but now when we do it, it's just as a temporary hold through the year. We can still use that money to pay something off, pay bills or what have you now. Road improvement stays, all the money stays with roads, and the earned income tax account, we talked about that already. The only other thing I wanted to point out to you was the budget reserve, which I already kind of talked to you about. This is also in your packet, and it summarizes the policy council tells you how much we have in there right now. I want to point this second chance thing out. You'll see that on some of the treasury report back 15 years ago, we had an officer who was on the Attorney General's task force, I believe, who was shot in the parking lot at the Plaza Shopping Center while he was working for that task force, and his vest failed. And that vest was made by a company called Second Chance. So there was litigation. They were sued, and they eventually came up with some money that had to be reimbursed to the pension fund. But not all the money had to be reimbursed to the pension fund. Some of it was this amount, 67,000 plus. Well, actually, that might include interest now, but 67,000 plus right now was put aside for whatever council wanted to do with it. You could use it for pension money if not, or if you wanted to or not. So we decided, let's put it in budget reserve. No reason to not spend it if you want to spend it on anything, but I just wanted to point that out to you. It may be time to start getting, ignoring that and just have the money in the budget reserve and forget about where it came from. I don't know, but I've always kind of kept it in mind so that I know why it's there and what's there. I don't know if I took 10 minutes, maybe I took more than that, but in any case, that's a summary of what's in this 5 pages. And please take a look at it. I'm happy to talk to you about it. But this again explains what those 5 reports are that the treasurer gives you every month. Anybody have any questions or comments? I didn't think so, so I'm done.
I think it's useful to do that.
Pardon me?
I think it's useful to do that.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Go on.
I actually have a couple of questions if you don't mind, for the finance chair.
For me?
What is the downside of perhaps consolidating some of these separate funds and combining them into one large one? So for instance, I see some of the building fund, which I understand the original premise of it. As we kind of start to, or like, for instance, that 67K that's sitting there. Is there a downside of maybe starting to merge some of this into either budget reserves or capital improvements where there's going to be anticipated spend regardless?
Just the idea of trying to earmark where things go. You can combine it all into one thing and then split it within that fund yourself in your own records if you want. You don't want to have, you're right about one thing, you don't want to have too many funds. And we're about as far as I'd want to go with funds if I were still going to be here, but I won't be. So anyway, I could have brought this up before, couldn't I? So I guess it's good that you're getting rid of me. Anyway, I wouldn't go any more than this, but that way you know what the money was earmarked for. I mean, you could merge the new building fund certainly easily into budget reserve. I would just be afraid that people would say, hey, let's start spending some of that. And down the road, what's that for? I mean, down the road, when you're all done with everything with this building, which you're never going to be, because you're always going to have maintenance issues and things like that. You could just say, if we have money left over, okay, let's just merge it. But I wouldn't do that yet until you're absolutely. The other thing was going to go for that was going to be the canopy. If we were able to do the canopy, that was going to come out of that fund too. So there were 3 things we were going to do with that: the wall, the egress, and the canopy.
Canopy, the carport.
Carport, yeah. So
I guess my concern is that the more of those line items you have, I think, the more chance there is for either that money to go missing or misappropriation of the funds, et cetera. I guess that's my question. Does that open up to any risk?
the others have always said we're okay. They've said I don't know, this new group is somebody that does a little bit more work than the last group does. So you definitely want to have them come in and talk to you when the audit's done. Make sure they talk to you and you can ask them questions like that too. But I think you're okay right now because we do itemize things like this in a monthly report so that you see that. I mean, you see everything,
But I think Frank has a point, and I put on my mental list before you even asked, like the pool, $14,000. We spent, microwave, all that stuff we just spent for the pool. They would be perfectly qualified for that money. Like the K9, we're not planning to get a dog anytime soon. So we should think about, can we spend it for something? Maybe we have to, if it's really K9 specific, maybe we have to donate it to another K9 department, or I don't know what we can do with it.
I'd have to look and see where all that money came from. I'm not 100% sure. It depends on whether it was donated specifically for that or not. I don't know.
And the building fund, actually, I'm going to talk about it later too. So I agree with you. It's a little bit cluttered, I think.
That's okay. I mean, I think you did a great job of organizing it, right? And I think that it's, when we read through the budget, right, it's very clear like how money is appropriated, et cetera. I'm looking for any potential risk or downside, that's all.
The main thing is every month, make sure at least somebody is monitoring it and checking it. I mean, I don't think we've had any problem with anybody that's worked here. I mean, I know you've had problem with me, but that's beside the point. But not financial, it's just been, insanity and things like that. And this is what I'm gonna be doing, comedy club. As soon as I retire, I'm gonna go on open mic night. And that's another place where it can fail. Anyway, I think the main thing is monitoring, making sure you know what's going on, and making sure that you look at that stuff all the time. Maybe you break it up, or maybe you all look at it. I don't know, but make sure you talk about it and don't hesitate to bring it up every month if you want, here at the finance committee meeting, for example, or at the public meeting. However, this is what Scott's going through right now because of all the stupid things they've done with money. And I think if they would have had stuff spelled out more like we do, people wouldn't be questioning as much about some of the things that's going on there. I mean, I don't know, but anything else?
Maybe the new manager will have a different way of doing
Yeah,
things.
I'm probably much better. So, anybody else?
No. Right,
See,
next we have.
I want to get workers' comp, before I
Next,
go.
we have Siemens invoice. I mean, the Borough Property Committee, I think you're set. I mean, there are some concerns raised on Tuesday as far as I could hear, but that has nothing to do with that invoice. I think that needs to be addressed separately, but the invoice, I think we have to pay our bill for them. So if anyone, okay, so we can pay that. WPJWA, I just wanted to report something back at the business committee. And unfortunately, I think Allison asked about 3 weeks ago, and so far we have not received any proposal, something for me to report back to Gore or to whoever, the citizens who raised that issue. So basically, so far, we have not received any proposal, which points to the fact, lots of people are complaining of WPJWA about the customer service. That's probably kind of showing what's going on with them. And funding for Westinghouse Rec. So you got two sheets. Please use the last one, which has $1 million in the bottom right field. What happened is, Allison, she gave me that thing 5 minutes ago, and all I want to do is compare our costs with our funding. And she put like money we spent already last year into that column, 352,000. And that's why it was missing on my funding column. But I wanted to have one column with all the money in. That's why we added that 369,000, which we paid out of ARPA already, which is like, doesn't match up exactly 352, but that's pretty much what it was. So basically, if you add everything together, it's 1.1 million. And that 1.1 million does not include, she couldn't get it yet organized. All the LSSE charges related to the Westinghouse Rec should be paid out of the Westinghouse Rec funds capital improvements. So that charges is probably, I think so far we paid them 75,000. So there will be at least, I would think, $200,000 we have to add to that 1.1. So the total is about 1.3. So if you look at the column on the right, so we have about 1 million. However, like Steve showed the ARPA funds, it was 172. I guess it was a different date, what Allison just did it today. That ARPA fund is also, we are supposed to consider it for Alcosan. So that money is not really earmarked for that. But you saw on the building fund, 500,000, and like Steve just said, it's capital, we paid with a bond, that money. So some of that money we could probably consider using for the Westinghouse Rec. So there's another source. And like Steve said, I think the $500,000 is probably too much, but we want to keep some of that money still in the building fund. So that's, I don't want any decisions today, but we have to do 2 decisions eventually. Do we want to use that 172,000 ARPA for sewage or for the Westinghouse Rec? And then the other thing, how much money out of the building fund we want to use for the Westinghouse Rec? That's 2 things we have to consider at some point.
Honorable Dinger. So a question I have is you have the total amount awarded, the total amount that we've spent.
Mhm,
You have the balance still due,
mhm.
but there's no line item for how much do we have? How much did we reserve for the project?
It's not, there is not, I mean, I just saw it, I just got it 5 minutes ago. So all of the money, I think what we really all agreed is you have to take the 172 out. We didn't agree on that. That's why it has the asterisk. We agreed to use the grant money of 75, the senior rec of 108, the out of the 23 capital improvement budget was 148, and in the 24 capital improvement budget is 141. And then ARPA, we already agreed to pay out of last year 369.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I misread this. So the last column is the money the funds that we have available.
Yes, but the ARPA, the 172 is subject to change. And then I don't have the building fund because it's potentially we have $500,000, but we don't want to use it all. You mean, so it's kind of only the ones without the asterisks are really committed. So we're basically, if I deduct the 172, we're a little bit short, or $400,000 short. We have to think about where it comes from. It could come out of the building fund or that ARPA fund, but the ARPA fund has to go potentially to the Alcosan. So that's something we have to think about it.
Thought we already paid a lot on that.
Alcosan? Like the 172, like was it, we didn't commit that money yet to anything, right?
Just whatever we paid so far came out of ARPA for us, yeah.
But the 172 is sitting in ARPA right now, but we haven't committed it to anything. Like you had in your table 171.
Yeah, that's what you have on this report, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I didn't get the numbers for
You had 171 in your
that
table,
in that report, didn't I?
but today's like 228. Allison said it was 172. I think Barb's question was, did we commit that money to anything?
Yeah, I'm seeing 171,000 at the end of January.
But that money is not committed to anything yet.
No, other than the fact that you had originally said part was going to go to the regionalization and the rest was going to go. See, that's how, I don't know if I have to look back to see if you actually formally voted that way or not.
Well, I thought we already used some of it for the regionalization, because wasn't the ARPA funds like 600,000 or
Yeah,
something?
yeah, it was, yeah. The problem was that the regionalization, if you remember, I think LSE, Kevin mentioned this, that the regionalization was not completed. As far as Alcosan's concerned, there were still some defects that they wanted us to correct. So we need to spend more than what you see here. Now, does that have to come out of here or can it come out of corrective action? That's up to you. You know, that's up to council. You can do it however you want.
I think paid out of ARPA was the public works.
Well, that was a bond issue, if you remember. We had some money in a bond issue. And I don't have that, unfortunately. I deleted those notes from all my stuff here because it was like about a year ago, but there was money in a bond issue that was used for that. And we did a truck out of liquid fuels too. Maybe we did 2 trucks out of liquid fuels. So.
Basically, we have to think about how much money we want to use out of the building fund and what do we do with that 172. 1.1 million is missing LSSE charges, which I think will be, if we already paid, I think it will be at least. She asked Kevin for an estimate and he didn't do it yet. It for finance.
Add a small note onto that last one.
Good question.
Just to add that the mansard roof still has the original price before we determined to cancel the removing the extension. So that should be, I think it's like $15,000 or $18,000 less that we'll need to pay on that. just above the totals.
Alison was like squeezing it in. She had to do a lot of other.
Committee of the whole, you're gonna talk about this under exec session. I just didn't want to let it slide. The reminder up there about the pension plan legal service RFP. Not something that you're, that desperate. Wouldn't talk to him again for months. So it is not immediate that as far as I know. Longer? Okay. So anyway, but you should make a decision rather than leave the two firms that. That's all I have.
Mr. Morris asked me to advise whether or not the sewer fee had to be altered by ordinance or resolution, and it does have to be changed by ordinance. It's in section 18302. Last time that it was changed, the fee was changed was 2013, it looks like. And then secondly, there is a definition on sidewalk. I think you talked about it during the ops committee meeting, and Steve indicated there was a question as to whether or not a parking pad is included in the definition. And I would say as it is drafted, it is not, because it is not a pedestrian walkway or designed for pedestrian walkway. Parking pad is designed for parking a vehicle. So if you want it included, we have to make some changes.
Can I'm sorry. Can I just ask a question too then? I don't know, I wanted to make sure Steve talked about sewer fee because I don't know what track you're on with that, whether you folks are looking to do it quickly or whether you're looking to take your time. I don't know, but I just wanted to make sure again that you were aware that it's going to take some time to advertise and all that. So you wouldn't be approving it this month and maybe not in April either. So I just, whenever you want to act on it, you should move on it, is what I'm saying. So.
Ask a question about clarification. We are not bound to any end of year or things. We can basically raise it anytime we want. Is that correct?
We haven't defined parking pad. We've just defined a side. Somebody has a parking pad along the street in their either home, you know, that it wouldn't be included if it was designed for parking vehicle. Park your vehicle on a sidewalk, that's. If you want. Well, if it's there for the purpose of pedestrian access.